What happened when a young host asked Barron Trump about regretting his famous parents? The answer left everyone speechless. The studio lights dimmed in New York's prestigious media center, where countless celebrities had faced tough questions before. But tonight was different. The atmosphere crackled with an unprecedented tension. Jake Martinez, the rising star of youth journalism known for his fearless interviews with Gen Z icons, sat perched on his modern chrome chair. His usual confidence was masking uncertainty. What followed would become the most talked-about interview of the decade, but no one could have predicted how a simple question about family would change everything. The young host's hands trembled slightly as he prepared to welcome his next guest. The audience held their breath. Then he appeared. Barron Trump, now towering at 6'7", his presence commanding attention as he walked across the stage. There was something different about him, something that made everyone lean forward in their seats. What happened next would leave America questioning everything they thought they knew about the former First Family. The interview began casually enough, with Jake maintaining his signature Gen Z charm. He shifted in his modernist chair, trying to match Barron's composed demeanor. "Welcome, Barron. It's been quite a journey watching you grow up in the public eye," Jake began, his voice carrying a hint of carefully practiced nonchalance. "How do you handle being constantly in the spotlight?" Barron's response was measured, his deep voice surprisingly gentle for someone of his stature. "I've learned to focus on what matters, my education, my future, the things I can control," he replied, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The audience listened intently as Barron spoke about his college experiences, his passion for cybersecurity, and his vision for the future. There was something disarmingly authentic about him that even the most skeptical viewers couldn't deny. Jake nodded appreciatively, but there was a glint in his eye that suggested he was just warming up. The real question, the one that would stun the nation, was still to come. "Your achievements are impressive." Jake leaned forward, his tone shifting ever so slightly. "But there's something everyone's been wondering about. Something more personal." The atmosphere in the studio suddenly changed. The audience could feel it, that electric moment before everything changes. Barron's expression remained neutral, but those in the front row noticed his hands tighten slightly on the armrests. What Jake asked next would not only silence the room, but would lead to a response that would echo across social media for weeks to come. Jake took a deep breath, the studio lights seeming to intensify around them. His next words came out deliberately, each one carefully chosen. "Barron, let me ask you something that millions of Americans have wondered." He paused, the silence deafening. "Do you ever regret having Donald and Melania Trump as your parents?" The audience gasped collectively. Even the seasoned camera operators froze, their lenses fixed on Barron's face. The question hung in the air like a physical presence, heavy and unavoidable. For a moment, Barron sat completely still. At just 18, he was facing a question that would make even the most experienced public figures stumble. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, something unexpected happened. A soft smile appeared on Barron's face, not the practiced smile of a politician's son, but something more genuine, more vulnerable. "You know," he began, his voice steady but touched with emotion, "people often ask me this question in different ways. They think they're being subtle, but they're really asking if I wish my life had been normal." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience before returning to Jake, who seemed caught off guard by the composure in his young guest's response. "But here's what they don't understand," Barron continued, leaning forward slightly. The next words he spoke would leave the entire studio in tears and make every parent in America stop and think. "People assume," Barron continued, his voice carrying a warmth that filled the studio, "that growing up as a Trump must have been about luxury, politics, and chaos. They imagine I'd rather have had normal parents." He paused, his eyes showing a depth of emotion that caught everyone off guard. "But what they never ask about is the father who, despite running a global organization and later a country, never missed a chance to call me during lunch breaks at school. The audience sat in stunned silence as Barron's voice softened with genuine feeling. They don't ask about the mother who, regardless of what was happening in the world, made sure to be there for every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every moment that mattered to me. A tear glistened in the corner of his eye, but his voice remained steady. Do I regret having parents who taught me to stand strong in my beliefs, even when the whole world disagrees? Who showed me that love isn't about public approval? Jake sat motionless, his prepared follow-up questions forgotten as Barron continued, his words touching something deep and universal. The real question isn't about regret, Barron said, his voice now barely above a whisper, yet somehow filling the entire studio. What he said next would make headlines across the globe, not for its controversy, but for its raw, unfiltered truth about family, love, and loyalty. You see, Barron said, rising slightly in his chair, his voice carrying the weight of years of unspoken truth. When the cameras are off, when the tweets stop, when the world isn't watching, that's when you see who your parents really are. His eyes glistened under the studio lights, but his voice grew stronger. My father, the man behind the headlines, taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you get back up. And my mother, she showed me that grace isn't weakness, it's power. The studio was absolutely silent now, hanging on every word. A tear rolled down the cheek of a woman in the front row. So, no, Jake, Barron's voice resonated with quiet conviction. I don't regret having Donald and Melania Trump as my parents. What I regret is that the world is so busy judging them. They miss seeing what I see. Two people who would move heaven and earth for their child. Jake struggled to maintain his composure, clearly unprepared for such raw honesty. But Barron wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his next words delivered with a gentleness that seemed to touch every heart in the room. You want to know the truth about growing up Trump? He asked, a small smile playing on his lips. What came next would not only silence his critics, but would become the most shared video clip of the year, touching millions of hearts across political divides. The truth is, Barron said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to embrace the entire studio, behind every headline, every controversy, every moment the public thought they knew everything about us, there was a father who still tucked me in at night, no matter how late he worked. He took a gentle breath, his composure touching something deep in everyone watching. A mother who would sit for hours, helping me practice my Slovenian, teaching me that our roots make us stronger. These are the moments that shaped me. Tears were now flowing freely in the audience. Even the hardened camera operators were visibly moved. Jake sat in stunned silence, his prepared skepticism melting away. You see, love isn't about being perfect, Barron continued, his words resonating with universal truth. It's about being there. Through every storm, every triumph, every moment of doubt, my parents didn't just tell me about unconditional love, they lived it. He paused, a gentle smile crossing his face. So, when people ask me if I regret being their son, I have just one answer. The studio held its breath, waiting for his final words. What Barron said next would not only go viral within minutes, but would spark a national conversation about family, forgiveness, and the true meaning of legacy. His simple yet profound response would remind America of something they had forgotten in years of political division. My answer is this, Barron said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. I'm proud to be their son, not because they're perfect, but because they taught me that real love persists even when the whole world is watching, waiting for you to fail. His words hung in the air like a tender revelation. They showed me that strength isn't in never making mistakes. It's in facing them, learning from them, and standing back up together as a family. Jake sat frozen, all his practiced cynicism forgotten. The studio audience was completely silent, many wiping away tears. In that moment, political divisions seemed to melt away, replaced by something more fundamental, the universal truth of family bonds. So, no, I don't regret having them as parents. Barron's voice grew softer but more powerful. What I regret is that the world was so busy judging us. They missed seeing what matters most, that at the end of the day, we're just a family who loves each other. The impact was immediate and profound. As Barron finished speaking, the studio erupted in spontaneous applause. People were standing, some crying, others nodding in understanding. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling would prove even more remarkable. Behind the scenes, crew members were wiping away tears. Hardened producers were making calls to their own parents. Something had shifted in the atmosphere, a reminder of what truly matters beyond the politics and headlines. By morning, the interview had ignited something unprecedented in American media. The clip of Barron's response spread across social media platforms with a speed that shocked even veteran publicists. #Barron Speaks and #Family Over Politics became the top trending topics worldwide. But unlike typical viral moments, the comment sections weren't filled with division. They overflowed with personal stories of family reconciliation. Parents called their estranged children. Children reached out to parents they hadn't spoken to in years. The raw honesty of an 18-year-old had somehow cut through years of political divide, touching something deeper in the American psyche. News networks struggled to frame the story within their usual partisan narratives. How do you politicize a son's pure love for his parents? Even the most cynical commentators found themselves moved by Barron's unscripted sincerity. Jake Martinez, the young host who had hoped to create a gotcha moment, made his own viral post the next day. "Last night, I came looking for controversy. Instead, I found a lesson in love, family, and grace. Thank you, Barron Trump, for teaching me what really matters." But perhaps the most powerful aftermath came quietly, away from the cameras. In homes across America, families sat together, watching the interview, having difficult but healing conversations. Barron's words had reminded them of a simple truth, that beyond the noise of politics and public opinion, family bonds remain our most precious foundation. The interview that was meant to expose regret had instead revealed something beautiful, that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in perfect parents or perfect children, but in perfect love through imperfect moments. Stories like this remind us that beyond the headlines and public personas, there are real human moments that can touch us all, moments that make us stop, reflect, and perhaps reach out to those we love. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family bonds, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear its message. Sometimes the simplest truths have the power to heal the deepest divides. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that go beyond the surface to find the heart of what matters. Until next time, remember, in a world of instant judgments, taking a moment to understand can make all the difference.